So, hello and good day, everyone, and welcome to the chapter 9 of the third editions of the Essentials of Meteorology. So, before we start, I have to introduce first myself. I am John Paul B. Asumbra, a third year student's major in science. So, today our topic is all about the weather forecasting. So, yourself will somewhat get to know on how to use the certain tools to do the weather forecasting. Okay? So let's get right into this lesson for today. Okay, as a jump start of this lesson, I have only two questions that I want to ask from you. And I wish that you are trying to answer also these questions to assist your prior knowledge about this topic. So basically, our first question is, who is responsible in predicting and collecting weather data? So you can guess it now by looking at the choices provided on the left side. Okay, what are your guesses? Okay, that is letter C. Because meteorologists are able to predict the changes in the weather patterns by using the several or the different tools. So they use these tools to measure the atmospheric conditions that occurred in the past and the present. And then also they apply these informations to create the educated guesses about the future's weather. So basically, I am discussing these different tools used by the meteorologists later. Okay, our next question is, how does the weather data being collected? Okay, that letter A is through weather instrument, letter B through weather maps, C is through weather data, and D is through weather forecaster. Okay, what is your guess? Okay, that is a letter A because weather data is being collected through weather instrument of the weather stations around the world. So this instrumentation is scattered and places into the different locations and regions. But those instrumentations, many of them are on land, but some of them also are on the oceans or the oceans on voyage. Okay, so weather stations collect data on the land and the sea. However, data in the atmosphere is collected using the weather balloons, the weather satellites, and also the radar. All right, so in line with this topic, I am going to discuss about the acquisitions of the weather informations and also the numerical weather predictions. And then when the forecasters issued the weather signals like watches, warning, and advisory to the public. And also, we are going to discuss also why does the forecast go array, and then the different weather forecasting tools, the different weather forecasting method, and also the accuracy and skills in weather forecasting. All right. Okay, now we are going to discuss the introductions of the weather forecasting. So, with our introduction, I'd like to say that a weather forecast are issued to save lives, to save property in crops, and to tell us what to expect in our atmospheric environment. Knowing what the weather will be like in the future, it is vital to many human activities and to the human interest. So, weather impacts us in such a great way. It impacts the farmers, it impacts the different industries, like travel industries and the transportations like buses, trains, and most of all the airplanes. No? So whether they are on time or they are delayed in their departures or their arrival. So also it impacts what the clothes we are going to wear. It impacts also the economy, the businesses, the energy demands for electrical grid. So weather has a huge impact. So that's why a weather forecasting in general is a very, very important. So there's a lot of the private or forecasting consultations and companies, the private and the government companies as well to do the weather forecasting for the vital areas like airlines, and there's just so many impacts caused by the weathers. Okay, so moving on to the acquisitions of the weather and formation. So basically, weather forecasting, this entails predicting how the present state change or the state of the atmosphere occurs. So what I am trying to say is that weather forecasting is predicting what the future's weather is going to be like or must to know the weather conditions over a fairly large area. So usually, you'll see this through observing stations which are located uh, across the world. So forecasters provide informations about this, and we have that we called the real-time forecasting data that we can see using the weather satellite imagery through also the observation. So they say that a weather forecasting must know the weather conditions over a large area. So for example, if the meteorologists use the instruments, so let us say the voice or the ocean voice, this instrument used in order for them to know what the weather condition. So for example, in the ocean, like we have the waves height and then the waves direction. So that's are done through the instrumentation. Okay? All right. So as far as the observing stations go, there is a network out there in the station. So basically, we have 10,000 land-based stations, and then we also have 100 of ships and buoys out there. So as I mentioned, the buoys is generally going to cover over the water area. So the weather that can be whether it can be Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, or the Pacific Ocean. So we have buoys that can be scattered around that ocean because we really don't have the ability to get data directly from those points because those are more remoted areas. So another thing, weather observing stations, they provide informations at least 4 times a day. And a lot of the airports, they observe conditions hourly. And they have something that's known as the ASOS, or a lot of airport are ASOS, which stands for Automated Surface Observing System. And that's give the airport the uh, automated data weather observations that allows the pilot to see what's the happening at the airport prior to taking off or landing. So basically, this is what we are see, o kung ito yung napapansin ninyo, kapag pumupunta kayo ng airport, yung building na mataas dyan. So ayun yung tinatawag nila na control tower. So ang ginagawa dyan sa control tower, so dito nila ini-examine o dito nila pinipredict no, yung mga weather informations like yung air, then the wind. So kasi malaking epekto ito bago sa kapag nagfa-flight yung airplane. So the upper level information, this can be supplied mainly by the radio sound, which are instrumentations that gathered from the weather balloon launches. So basically we have that we call the aircraft, which actually instrumentations, no? And some of the aircrafts or some of the airlines, they are collected weather data. So even en route, no? Yung mga route from one directions to the next or the other location. And then also we have what we called the weather satellite. Okay, so these are the list of the organizations that are responsible in weather data collection, data assimilations, and weather forecasting. So the World Meteorological Organizations, or WMO, and the National Center for Environmental Predictions, or the NCEP, that are the supercomputer weather center that are located up in the Maryland, and that is typically a branch of NOAA, or NOAA, or the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So, and then we have also the National Weather Service, or the services, which we are quite familiar with us. In Philippines, we have what we call PAG-ASA, which stand for Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Service Administration. So basically, it is a Philippines national institution dedicated to provide floods and typhoon warnings, the public weather forecasts and advisories, meteorological, astronomical, climatological, and other specialized informations and services also, primarily for the protections of life and property and in support of the economic productivity. And then also we have the National Weather Services Forecast Offices. This offices is do the actual forecasting, no? They are doing the actual forecasting. So there are a couple of the different organizations that gathered the weather information that can be looking at the weather satellite imagery. So the observations, the Doppler radar, and then they collect that data that they require, that the weather information, and then they use that in determining trends, and from those trends, then they work on a forecast.
All right,
All
so
right,
the
so the
numerical weather
numerical weather
predictions,
predictions, it
the
is the
predictions
predictions
of a
of
weather
a weather
phenomena
phenomena
caused
caused
by
by
the
the numerical
numerical
solutions
solutions
of the
of the
equations
equations
governing
governing
the
the
emotions
emotions
and
and
changes
changes
of
of
the
the
conditions of the
atmosphere.
atmosphere.
So I
So
can't
I
make
can't
to
make to
elaborate this too
elaborate this
much
too much
because this
because
topic
this
is
topic is
very
very
complicated
complicated
kasi ito po
kasi ito
is
po is
solving. So
solving. So
basically,
basically,
the numerical
the
weather
numerical weather
predictions,
predictions,
it
it
is
is
very
very
familiar to
familiar
us
to us
because
because
we
we
can
can
see
see
it
it
when
when
we
we
are
are
watching
watching
the
the
weather
weather
forecasting,
forecasting,
and
and that
that
is
is
the
the colorful
colorful
graphics
graphics
on
on
the
the
news
news
used
used
by
by
the
the
meteorologists.
meteorologists.
So
So
like
like
that,
that,
din
din nakikita
nakikita
ninyo
ninyo
sa
sa
ating
ating screen.
screen.
So
So the
the analysis
analysis is that the So the illustrations above are the different tools that are acquired data of the different variables, okay? And then the observations obtained from those tools is passing through the observation system. And then from observation system after that, all the observed data is ingested to the data assimilations to analyze the informations and to identify what are the errors. Okay, then after the data assimilation, it comes next to the forecast model. So this is where forecasters plotted the data comes from the data assimilations into what they call the surface chart, to the upper chart, to the numerical weather predictions, to the model output, and also to the monitor weather chart. Okay, and then after that, all the forecast is all of that. The forecast is that the last and the final process kung saan makikita na ninyo si Mang Nathaniel na nagbibigay ng ulat panahon sa I am ready. Okay, another one is that the prognostic chart, or also known as progs, no? It is a computer generated chart used to visualize the weather condition. So this chart is used by the forecaster to represent the atmospheric condition at the specific future time. So this is a very, very familiar to us because this is what we see or what we seen when we are watching the 3B news. Okay, now let us proceed to why forecasts go array or bakit nga ba minsan ay nagkakaroon ng hindi tama na forecasting. So basically, our forecasters is utilize more than one model, and each model it has its own strength and weaknesses based on the differences on how they approximate the small scale processes. So kaya minsan ay nagkakaroon ng hindi tamang forecast dahil sa approximation na ginagawa ng mga meteorologists. So bibigyan ko kayo ng example. So the example is a water droplets colliding and sticking together during the cloud formation. So this example, it is an example of the process that is too small for the model to see. So dahil maliit naman talaga si raindrops. So kapag ganito ang situation, forecasters, they come up into the approximation. So balit, kung ating titignan, ang approximation ay sa kahit anong anggulo ay hindi perpekto o hindi tama ang results na maaaring kalabasan. Pero sa mga forecasters, sometimes approximations ay nakakatulong sa kanila para mabalanse ang potential na biases ng bawat model na ginagamit. So I will give an example why does the forecast can go array sometimes. So there are many reasons why a forecast can go wrong. And the number one of that is that majority of the model are not global in coverage. So ano pong ibig sabihin yan? So dahil nga po, ang bawat tools o ang mga model ay may kanya-kanya silang mga strength and weaknesses sa pag-gathered or pag-acquired ng weather data. So ang iilan sa kanila ay maaaring magamit lamang sa pagkuha ng surface variable, subalit ang iba naman ay magagamit lamang din sa pagkuha ng mga atmospheric variable. Kaya ang mga data na iyon ay kapag pinagsama-sama sila at isasalpak sa tinatawag na supercomputer, na siyang magkukompute ng data, so minsan ay doon na nagkakaroon ng biases dahil sa bawat model ay may iba't ibang data na ibinibigay na maaring hindi tugma sa data na nakuha ng ibang model dahil po sa magkaiba rin na mga location sila. Okay? The number two is the sparse observation in some regions. Example over oceans and high altitude. Okay. So kahit na nakakalakap ng thousands of observations ang ating mga meteorologists a day, ang mga observations minsan ay hindi din nagkakatugma-tugma. Lalo na kapag ang data ay nagmula sa mga oceans o yung doon sa mga area na matataas ang altitude. Kasi yung mga area na yun minsan ay sila din ang mostly na nakakaapekto ng weather patterns by distributing heat and moistures around the globe. Okay? So another forecasting problem is that the computer models cannot adequately interpret many of the factors that influence surface weather, such as the interactions of the water and ice, no? And the local terrains on the weather system. Simply because yung some of the models, ang kinukuhaan lang nilang features or yung some models take a large geographic features only tulad ng mountains at ng ocean. So ayan lang. So subalit sa kabilang banda ay nai-ignore nila yung mga smaller features tulad ng hills and ng lakes na kung saan ang maliliit na features na ito ay may malaking impluensya din sa local weather. And then the last one is inherent flaws and the computer model. So ito na yung computer factors along the modal boundaries from a sparseness of the data, lalo na kapag ang resolution o yung distance between grid points ay masyado nang maliit. Kaya hindi na nakikita mostly. Nangyayari ito kapag may malalaking area na kinukunan ng data dahil kapag mas malaki ang area ay mas bumababa yung resolutions ng grid points. Kaya hindi nakikita yung ibang mga observations sa grid point. Okay? Then another thing is may dagdag ko lang is that the forecasting errors increases through time. Okay? If the forecast is beyond 3 days, that are more likely to be incorrect. Ayun ang sabi doon. Kasi nagkakaroon ng pagbabago-bago ng weather araw-araw. So maaaring ang weather na na-predict nila 4 days from now or 7 days from now ay maaaring magbago. So tulad nito ng illustrations dito na nakikita ninyo sa screen, this is a 7 days forecast. So possibly the 4 days up 5, 6, and 7, so pwede na hindi tama yung forecast dyan kasi posible pong magbago yung panahon. Possibly din na itong 4 to 7 days forecast ay posibleng tama pero malaki pa rin yung chance niya na magiging mali siya kasi sa pabago-bago ng panahon. Okay, next, these are the following. The following are the different weather signal imposing to the public. So ngayon aalamin natin when does the specific weather signal is being imposed. Okay, we have the 3 different signals. So the advisories, the warning, and the watches. Okay. All right. So the first one is the advisory. Advisory are issued to inform the public of the hazardous driving conditions caused by the winds, dust, fogs, snow, sleet, or the freezing rain. So the advisory, it means that the conditions are likely to occur. It is typically span over a large geographic area or for the long period of time. So this is issued to inform the public of the conditions that might be occur. So ibig sabihin kapag advisory, ini-issue siya kapag yung specific condition ay maaaring mangyari. So I have here the example. So bunsod ng malakas na pag-ulan na nararanasan sa bayan ng Nara, ang mga residente na malapit sa ilog ay nag-iingat o pinag-iingat dahil sa maaaring pagbaha. So ayun po yung advisory. So ibig sabihin, ang term dito is pinag-iingat yung mga residente dahil sa posibleng pagbaha. That yung pagbaha is a conditions that might be occur. Okay? And then the second one is the warning. Warning indicates that hazardous weather is either imminent or actually occurring within the specific forecast area. Okay, so a warning means that the conditions are occurring or imminent. So during warning signal is being imposed, it indicates that hazardous weather in the specific forecast area are actually occurring. Okay? Ibig sabihin, nangyayari. No? Nangyayari na. Okay, ang example nito is bunsod ng malakas na pag-ulan na nararanasan sa bayan ng Nara, ang mga residente na malapit sa ilog ay naghahanda sa paglilikas dahil sa patuloy na pagtaas ng level ng tubig. So, ay tulad ng sinabi ko, nangyayari na siya. Ay yung pangyayari dito ay patuloy na pagtaas ng level ng tubig dahil sa patuloy na pag-ulan, kung kaya't yung mga residente ay naghahanda sa paglilikas. Okay? Okay, the last one is watches. Watches indicates that atmospheric conditions favor hazardous weather occur during a particular regions during a specific period of time. So basically, a watches, it means that the specific weather conditions is possible. So big sabihin, the particular conditions ay asahan talaga na nangyayari. So ang example naman ng watch natin is bunsod na malakas na pag-ulan na nararanasan sa bayan ng Nara. Ang mga residente na malapit sa ilog ay naglilikas dahil sa patuloy na pagtaas ng level ng tubig. So kung ating mapapansin, during warning signals, no, ang mga residente doon ay naghahanda pa lang sa paglilikas dahil sa patuloy na pagtaas ng tubig. Subalit kapag watch naman po na warning, dito na yung mga residente tulad dito, ang mga residente daw ay naglilikas na dahil sa patuloy na pagtaas ng tubig. So big sabihin, during watch signal, yung public ay nagkakaroon na ng take of action. No? May ginagawa na sila. So, para mas maintindihan natin, kapag sinabi nating advisory, ang advisory po ay may kalakip na pag-iingat. Okay? Kapag watch naman, ang kalakip ng watch is okay, so para hindi tayo malito, kapag sinabi nating advisory, so ibig sabihin kapag advisory, ito ay may kalakip na kahulugan na pag-iingat. O kapag advisory ay all right. So this is another example. So this is a winter storm example. No? So as you can see here, this is composed of winter storm advisory, winter storm warning, and winter storm watch. Okay, so let us first discuss the winter storm advisory. So during winter storm advisory, so big sabihin daw, i-expect natin dito na magkakaroon syempre ng winter weather, no? Dahil nga winter storm 'yon. So dahil expected na magkakaroon ng winter weather, you are going to exercise the cautions, no? Ayon ang winter storm advisory. So the second one is the winter storm warning. So what during winter storm warning, the snow, the sleet or ice, it is possible to happen. Okay? Dahil nga posibleng mangyari, so you have to be prepared. Okay? And then the winter storm watch. So kung doon sa warning kanina, si snow and si sleet or si ice are possible, kay watch naman, sila ay expected talaga na mangyayari. So dahil expected sila, you have to take an actions for this. Okay? Okay, now let us proceed to weather forecasting tool. So some of the forecasting tools out there are available to the meteorologists. So we have a couple interesting set of tools here. So the AWEBs, the Doppler radar, the meteograms, the soundings, and the satellites. Okay, so the first one of that is the Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System, or the AWEP. So the National Weather Office, as of 2018, the time of this recording, they're getting works to as an AWEPS 2. So which is the next versions of the AWEPS? So basically, AWEPS is an interactive computer system that integrates the all meteorological and hydrological data with satellites and radar imagery. So this helped the forecaster to prepare and issues more accurate and timely forecast and warning to the public. So this is a very handy tools for the National Weather Services employees. So I have the illustrations of AWEBs in order for you to familiar with this weather forecasting tool. So we have also that we call the Doppler radar, which are very familiar with us because we hear and we see this a lot on the evening news. So if you are wake up in the morning earlier, looking at the morning news, when the TV meteorologists bring up the latest radar picture, so that is usually the Doppler radar. So Doppler radar is the meteorologist's window into observing severe storms. So that is the use of the Doppler radar to observe the severe storm. But Doppler radar can see not only by the precipitations in a thunderstorm, through its ability to reflect microwave energy or the reflectivity, but motions of the precipitations along the radar beam. So in other words, Doppler radar, it can measures how fast the rain, how fast the snow, the sleet and hails is moving towards or moving away from the radar. Then we have something known as a meteogram, which is basically a forecast into the future for the specific site or location. So meteograms are going to show you the forecasted winds, forecasted temperatures, barometric pressures, the cloud coverage, and the chances of precipitations. No? So meteograms are a very, very useful in forecasting as far as a tool. Okay, this is the another example of the metrogram. So basically, this is my personal screenshot because I wanted to know the specific the current conditions in my entire location. So kung makikita ninyo dyan, this is the metrogram. So ito yung nandito nakalagay yung area, so San Manuel. And then nakalagay din dito kung ilang temperatures meron tayo ngayon dito sa lugar na ito. And then the cloud shows nandito at the right side, no? So ito po yung meteograms. Okay, another tool is that a sounding or sounding are associated with the upper airborne weather balloon. So this is typically occur throughout the United States at designated locations for the soundings, and meteorologists use the sounding as the vertical profile of the atmosphere. So with the use of sounding, they know what's the temperatures going with height or where is the wind is going with height, or what the humidity is going. It is increasing or it is decreasing as you go up into the altitude with height. Okay? So on the next chapter, the chapter 10, we are talking about the thunderstorm and tornadoes. And sounding is very, very important as far as the severe thunderstorm forecasting. But anyway, a sounding, it is a vertical profile of the atmosphere that tells us again how the temperatures, the humidity, the barometric pressures of wind, and how that is changing with height. And that is sounding. Okay, next is the satellites data. So basically, we have two major types of the weather satellites orbiting in our Earth's surface. So these two satellites rather, are differ in terms of their distance above the Earth's surface and also their orientations of the orbit. No? Ayun ang pagkakaiba nila. So these two satellites are the polar orbit satellites, and the second one is the geostationary satellites. All right, so the first one is the polar orbit satellite. So it orbits about 850 kilometer above the Earth. So 850 kilometer, that is the distance of the polar orbit from the Earth's surface. Okay? So the polar orbit, it orbits from north or south pole directions. And every 100 minutes, 15 degrees per orbit yung kanyang tinatakbo. Okay, so itong orbit na ito ay ang kanyang revolving direction is from north to south lang daw. Okay? So, at ang kanyang naiikot sa loob ng 100 minuto ay nakakaikot ito siya ng 15 degrees ng orbit natin. So, when we are computed that, a polar orbit satellites can revolve the entire orbit in just 40 hours. Okay? So next, especially polar orbit are important for the polar regions. So ano-ano nga ba yung mga polar regions na yan? So yung mga polar regions ay sila yung mga Earth-designated areas na between sa North and the South Pole and the Arctic or the Atlantic circles. No? So yung mga bansang nakakabilang dito ay bansang Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Russia. Ayan, ayan yung mga bansa. So iilan lamang yan sa mga bansang matatagpuan doon sa polar regions. Okay, the next one is the geostationary satellites. So geostationary satellites orbits about 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. So ito naman yung kanyang distance galing doon sa surface ng Earth, 36,000 kilometers. So sobrang layo niya compare doon sa polar orbit satellites. Then the geostationary satellites, it orbits around to the equator. It remains over a fixed Earth location. So, doon sa map, yung equator natin, ito yung nasa gitna, di ba? So, big sabihin yan, ang revolving directions ni geostationary satellites is from north to east or from east to west. So, big sabihin dito siya nagre-revolve sa ating x-axis. Yung polar satellites natin, siya ay nagre-revolve dito sa y-axis. Okay? So the geostationary satellites continues high-quality view of mid-altitude in the trophic region. So these satellites is nagtatransmit siya na high-quality photograph to the receiving system dito sa ground.
Okay,
Okay, this is the
illustrations in order for you to visualize what does the polar orbiting satellites and geostationary satellites revolving around the Earth. So basically, as you can see, the polar orbit satellites, it revolve to the Earth from north to south, while the geostationary satellites, it can revolve to the Earth from east to west or from east to west. So the geostationary satellites are on the x-axis and polar orbiting satellites is on the y-axis.
Okay, and now let us proceed to other forecasting method or the forecasting technique. So basically, we have four major forecasting techniques, and that is the climatological forecast, the persistence forecast, the analog method, and the last one is the statistical or the numerical forecast rather. Okay. Okay, the number one is climatological forecast. So during the climatological forecast, a forecasters are not really going to use anything available for to them about to the day-to-day conditions that they are experiencing. So they are not going to their weather stations and read their barometric pressures or the temperatures or the dew point or anything like that. So basically, they are going to do is to examine their calendar. So ayun ang ginagawa dito sa climatological forecast. Ini-ignore nila yung mga different tools, no? Yung mga data na acquired in different tools. Because ang ginagamit lang nila, o kaya ang ginagawa nila, is ini-examine lang nila yung kanilang calendar. Okay, bibigyan ko kayo ng example. So, tomorrow is November 17, and on the record, in the last 5 years, and the same day is rainy day. Okay? So they assume that day will be a raining day also in that particular area or places. So it means they ignored no, any informations about the current atmospheric conditions, and they simply use the informations about the region's climate to forecast the weather on a day-to-day or a seasonal basis. So sorry, that is climatological forecast, no? So big sabihin niyan, dahil nga sa 5 taon na pare-pareho ang ang weather sa ganitong araw, so i-assume na rin nila na this year and the same day ay ganito rin yung posibleng weather. So dahil nga umulan ng November 17 ng nakalipas na 5 taon, so pare-pareho yun na kanilang na-record. So ngayon, November 17 din, so uulan din. So ganun ang climatological forecast. Okay, the second one is the persistence forecast. So basically, a persistence forecast, it is the opposite, no, of the climatological forecast. So why? Because during the persistence forecast, they only use the current condition. Meteorologists use the current condition. So in this forecast, they assume that the future's weather condition will be the same to the present condition. So ganun yung persistence forecast. Now, for example, kung umuulan ngayon, ay posible din na umulan bukas. So tulad nga ng sinabi ko na the weather condition will be the same as the present condition. No? I-assume nila yon. Yung future condition will be the same as the present condition. Kaya nga siya persistence is because obstinate of the continuance of the current condition. So binabase lang nila yon kung ano yung ngayon, ayun din ang posibleng weather bukas. That is the persistence forecast. Okay? Okay, the third one is the analog forecast. So basically, analog forecast is uses no historical weather conditions to predict the current and the future's conditions. So it means these forecasts are based on the historical conditions, no, nakabase siya doon sa historical condition of a particular places or particular area or the region. So for example, today is a first day of the month of June. No? Okay. So dahil alam mo na ang month of June to the month of November, it is a rainy season in the Philippines. So the forecasters, they assumed that anytime, any day, ay magkakaroon, no, mayroong pag-ulan o may aasahang pag-ulan sa Pilipinas kasi ayun ang usual na nangyayari sa ganitong buwan kada taon. And those are types of the forecast that are based on the historical condition and that they are called analog forecast. So, na ano nila yon doon sa history ng forecasting. Doon nila ibinabase. That is the analog forecast. Okay, the last one is the numerical forecast or the statistical forecast. So this is a different from the other methods of forecasting. So magkaiba doon sa tatlo. Because the numerical weather forecast, it is strictly depend upon the output of the computer models that are gathered of the different forecasting tool. So during the numerical weather forecast, hindi dito naghuhula-hula lang o gagayahin ang weather conditions ng mga nakaraang taon o pagbabasihan ang lagay ng panahon ngayong araw, kundi mayroong basis at ayon yung mga data na na-acquired from different tools that haven't undergo from the analysis. So basically, the numerical forecast, ito talaga yung palagiang ginagamit ng mga meteorologists, no? Dahil ayun ay nakabase doon sa mga data na nagagathered from the different tools. Okay? Okay, now let us proceed to the last slide, which is the accuracy and skills in the weather forecasting. So, in spite of the complexity and ever-changing nature of the atmosphere, forecasts made for between 12 to 24 hours are usually quite accurate, and those made for between 1 to 3 days are fairly good, and beyond about 7 days, however, forecast accuracy falls off rapidly. So, big sabihin, between 12 to 24 hours, ito yung forecast na accurate talaga. So kapag 1 to 3 days na, posibleng accurate pa rin siya, pero hindi na ganun talaga na accurate. And then, however, the 7 days forecast, no, yung mga 7 days forecast, posible daw na mas bumaba na yung accuracy ng isang forecast kapag gano'n nakatagal ang duration niya. Okay? So, we are talking about the skills of the forecaster. So, minsan ang skills ng isang forecasters ay nakatutulong upang makapagbigay ng accurate na forecast kasi minsan tulad ng mga nasabi ko, mayroong mga biases sa data na nakukuha na nagmumula sa mga forecasting tool. So in that instances, yung skills ng isang forecasters due to experiences also, maaaring magkaroon siya ng considerations to assume some of the data to balance, no? Para i-balance yung mga data to make the forecast accurate. So that is the skills. Kaya napakahalaga talaga sa mga forecasters o sa mga meteorologists yung kanilang skills when it comes to forecasting, no? Dahil malaking tulong yun lalo na kapag binabalanse nila yung mga biases ng data. Alright, so here I end my presentations and I hope that you have learned a lot from this topic. So once again, good day everyone and keep safe, okay?